Or like Flying in a Blue Dream, you know. Right?
Yeah.
Every note as even as possible, and still have that little bounce.
The amazing Bryan Bella, who I've been a huge fan of for a long time, Bryan. We hoodwinked him into coming to Manchester and hanging out with us here.
We're here in the middle of the Aristocrats European tour. I'm up nice and early after a show day with another show coming up. So if there's bags under my eyes, everyone's just going to have to forgive me out there in internet land. But I'm happy to be here. I know we've been talking about this for a long time. I can't believe I'm finally here.
It's like 3 years.
Yeah.
4 years or something like that. Yeah.
We're
pretty
efficient.
efficient.
We talked earlier.
We did.
Yeah, we had one, but it was one of those remote Skype.
It was like from Skype, wasn't
it? It's always better to realize that actually, yes, you do exist in real life.
Yeah, I do.
Not just on the little rectangle.
So if you don't know who Bryan is, obviously you might have been living in a cave. He's played with Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, the Aristocrats. Like, who else jumps to mind, Bryan?
Well, I mean, also Mike Keneally. You know,
Mike Keneally, John Petrucci. Like, all of the guitar gods seem to really love you.
But, you know, it's the strangest thing because I was really, when I was growing up, I mean, of course, I liked Led Zeppelin and I was really into Pink Floyd and Yes and some Rush. So there was like playing there, but it was never like, I never was like looking at the bass like Stu Hamm or Victor Wooten and being like, how can I push this into the next dimension? I was never looking at extended technique. I just kind of wanted to play bass in a good band. And then somehow I ended up in this coterie of, you know, of like technique pushing guitarists. So maybe it works out that like I'm like the bass player that just wants to play bass, you know, so they can do all this crazy stuff.
How did you even find the bass in the first place?
Well, I was a rotten kid. I was taking classical piano lessons, and then my parents were like, well, you should be in the orchestra also. And I didn't really want to be in the orchestra, so I thought, I'm just going to play the most obnoxious possible instrument. They're just going to hate carrying this thing around. So I picked the double bass, the acoustic bass. Yeah. And of course, not many people were playing the acoustic bass, and I'm playing it in the orchestra for a couple of years. And then this is the weirdest thing, is that... So I wasn't.
You picked it to punish your parents.
I did. God, I apologize to them for everything. I was such a horrible kid. But then when I was, I think 13, the Stray Cats came around, and then I heard the song "Rock This Town," and I'm like, finally, something cool I can play on acoustic. So I went on acoustic for like 10 minutes, and I was like, that sounded great. And then I looked at my hands, and they looked like shredded cheese.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's horrible. I want to play electric. So I ended up playing electric because of the Stray Cats.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. And obviously, if you've not heard the Stray Cats,
it's like
jive.
Rockabilly, old school.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So I picked up an electric. I'm like, oh, this is much easier to play an electric. My hands don't hurt anymore.
Yeah.
And then I told the orchestra guy, I was just like, listen, I really just want to play electric in the jazz band. And the orchestra guy was like, well, because he didn't have another acoustic bassist in the orchestra. And he was like, well, you have to stay in the orchestra if you want to play in the jazz band. And I'm like, but I don't want to be in the orchestra. He's like, well, you don't have a choice. I'm like, well, yes, I do. I don't have to be in the jazz band or the orchestra. And so I quit everything.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I did. I walked away from the school music program for 5 years because the guy was, you know.
But carried on playing.
I carried on playing at home, yes. I stayed in my bedroom and I learned all the Led Zeppelin stuff. I remember one of the first things was, you know, I just... I just remember like thinking, oh my God, that's the coolest bass line.
Yeah.
That and Good Times, Bad Times and all the John Paul Jones stuff.
Hey, listen, we're going to be going back to the main video in just a few seconds, but quickly, I wanted to let you know that we have got a special SBL giveaway club that you are going to want to be a part of because it's 100% free to join. Each and every month, we give away audio interfaces, strings, bass heads, pedals, cables, multi-effects, straps. We even give away basses. And to join the giveaway club for free, all you need to do is go to sblgiveaway.com or just click the link in the description. Now, with that said, good luck in this month's giveaway, and let's get back to the main video. And how old were you when that transition from upright to electric, when did that happen?
13.
13.
And that's when I started playing electric at 13. And I didn't really even play it that much. I just kind of played it for fun. I was playing piano more.
So your reading was kind of together before you even really went to a certain level before you even got to electric bass.
I knew some basic theory and I could read music, although more treble clef than bass clef because it was all piano. But then I kept playing piano by ear. Like I just wanted to play Pink Floyd songs on piano. Get stoned and play Pink Floyd songs on piano. Who doesn't want to do that? So it was a weird kind of ghetto ear training course that I gave myself, and I would just play like "Shine on You, Crazy Diamond" and like songs from The Wall and some Yes stuff.
Were your parents musos or not?
Not at all.
So did you have music? Like, did you have a piano in the house?
We had a piano in the house.
You did, yeah.
My grandmother played some piano, and my mom did take piano lessons, so they just had a piano.
Right, yeah.
But my dad was a lawyer, and my mom was a teacher, and there's no professional musicians in either side of the family. So I was kind of coming at it from a kind of a green place.
Yeah. And when you were like, you know, in your early teens, 13, 14, 15, did you know that you wanted to be a pro musician at that point?
I didn't know anything except I knew I didn't want to go to Harvard.
Got it.
Like there was an Ivy League track that was kind of like set up for me, and because that's what my whole family did. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I don't want to do this. And growing up in New Jersey, you know, it was a nice town. The public schools were really good, and that's what it was all about. It was about getting into good schools and getting a good professional job and blah, blah, blah. And I just knew that I was destined for something else. I just didn't know what it was. And then Metallica came along. And I remember the first time I heard like Fight Fire with Fire, I was already into metal, but it was like Motley Crue and like all the kind of hair metal stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, at least they look outrageous.
Yeah.
But when I heard Metallica, I just remember thinking to myself, that is some angry music.
Yeah.
You know, and like I remember when Fight Fire with Fire came out, and Ride the Lightning was the first album that I got. And I heard Cliff Burton for the first time, and I learned that bass solo. And I remember hearing Damage Incorporated and thinking to myself, how is Cliff Burton playing that fast? And so I'm like 14, 15 years old, and I'm sitting there, because the riff is basically, it's like, except it's,
yeah.
So I'm like, I can't play that fast. And I wasn't sitting there practicing technique with a metronome. I never practiced technique with a metronome.
Got it.
So without knowing that Cliff was doing it with one finger, I just kind of took two fingers and started thinking to myself, what if I just flipped it back and forth like this? And so then next thing I knew, I'm like, it took me about a week or two, but I was going.
And that all came from trying to learn that
Just
riff,
from trying to learn that one thing. And that's how I've learned all my technique. It was never like, I'm going to learn a technique. It was always, I want to play that song, but I don't know how. And I don't have the technique to do it.
So let's just figure out
how to do it.
Yeah.
I guess it was kind of lazy because I wasn't a scale practicer and I wasn't a metronome technique practicer.
Yeah.
And so my punishment,
and you still use that now, haven't you?
Well, I didn't use it for 25 years.
Oh, really? Because I've seen you use that before.
But the thing is that no one ever asked me to play metal.
Right.
Like, you know, I ended up going to Berklee College of Music, thank God. And I met Joe Travers, who was a big Zappa fan. He got into Dweezil Zappa's band, and then he got me into Dweezil Zappa's band, got me an audition. And then I came to California, and that was the start of my career. And next thing I knew, I was playing music that had all these crazy notes and riffs and difficult technique. And then I had to really kind of put that to the test. Well, if I don't know how to play something, I better learn how to play it, or else I'm not going to be able to keep up with these freaks.
Yeah.
So I was designed to kind of be either a metal or an R&B bass player, you know?
Yeah.
I learned all of it, like a lot of James Jamerson stuff and just regular old kind of pop funk stuff. I used to love playing along with Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, because when you were playing before, you were playing like Tower of Power stuff.
Oh, yeah, you know.
Like, is that stuff that you were listening to when you were a kid as well?
Yeah, exactly. Or like the Stevie Wonder stuff. I mean, I remember just. I mean, that's.
Were you into all that stuff when you were at Berklee as well? Did that sort of like come with you?
I was actually. We played. I was in a band. It was a band. We put together these projects, and like the thing
at Berklee,
and the thing I wanted to do, because I could see that there was a lot of shredding going on, and like that wasn't for me. You know, I just was like, I just want to groove.
Yeah.
And also, I wasn't getting noticed as a player because I wasn't a flashy player, and there were flashy players that were there. So
that would be an interesting thing for you to open up about as well, is just that there's obviously a certain amount of social pressure for people to do and play a certain way.
Well, especially in 1990.
To be noticed,
I mean,
right?
in 1989 and 1990, man, it was just like, I mean, you know, people were, God bless Billy Sheehan. I know he was here.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like watching him and Steve Vai do like all the David Lee Roth solo stuff and the Shy Boy and all that. I'm looking at that and I'm like, first of all, I'm never going to look like that. Like, I would look ridiculous.
Well, you look good in spandex.
With leather. Yeah, I'm just not tall and skinny enough. I'm just never going to be that guy. And second of all, I don't want to, it's just not where my heart is in that, all that crazy technique. Yeah. Of course, I ended up having to, you know, learn all sorts of crazy stuff with you know, when I started playing with Steve Vai.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I wasn't into that. So I decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a huge spectacle, like a 15-piece funk band.
Got it.
And we'll play Stevie Wonder, and we'll play Fishbone, so we'll play Chili Peppers, and, you know, so that way we can just like, I mean, just stuff like...
Yeah.
That's what so that's what I was trained to do.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm sitting here having to try and figure out what the lick to Freak Show XS is, you know, that. I mean, you know, I had to sit there for weeks and figure that out, you know, because it's like, I wasn't trained to do this.
Yeah.
So, and then my ultimate punishment for being lazy with technique when I was a kid is ending up in a band with Guthrie Govan and Marco Man. It's like, really?
They've got all the technique.
I know. It's and I just do the best I can to just kind of keep it anchored and make sure the groove is always there.
What do you think that, you know, when you were at Berkeley and you created the funk band, was there any, and cause like we've got a ton of students that are at, you know, places like in Berkeley and at places like Berkeley, and for those guys, what would you say? In this era, do something wacky or fast or whatever to be noticed or die. You know,
first of all, everything's okay. That's the great thing about now. Is that back then we only had a few media sources and a few outlets for music. The major labels, that was it. So, you know, and major like the major magazines, there weren't that many of them. The tastemakers were few, and the influence was far and wide. So now you can narrowcast online, find your little niche that you like, and just totally go into it.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're a young muso, like I've noticed that we're talking like 2 generations now away from us, like, you know, for guitar music, it tends to be like where my world is. Of course, I know Joe Satriani and John Petrucci and Mike Keneally and Guthrie, you know, at some point we were kind of like the next generation to Joe and Steve, or Guthrie was anyway. And now you can see that like Pliny, you know, is this guy from Australia, him and his amazing band bass player Simon Grove, who's great. You should talk to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's awesome. And those guys have come along, and there's a lot of that kind of like clean arpeggiation, muso, odd time signature with weird kind of drum rhythmic patterns from Meshuggah. Kind of like Animals as Leaders.
I was about to say Animals as Leaders,
but only the clean stuff.
Yeah.
That's like a whole genre now. Like, have you heard Chan?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, there are musos out there, like, doing it in a completely different way, and it's not all chops-based. In fact, a lot of it is actually kind of form-based.
Yeah.
Which
it's
is
all
cool.
project-based, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
They've all got, like, projects together.
But, I mean, like, you know, you just got to be able to just groove, just to be able to just put down a groove. I mean, we're bass players.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be job
Rule one.
Tone and groove. You know, it should be... Start there, you know, get it, you know, get a nice even tone. You don't always have to dig in like I was just doing. Your right hand is so powerful, you know, you can...
You do some strange things with your right hand. Sometimes you play with your index and your middle finger.
Oh, God.
Sometimes you play with your index and your ring finger. What's all that about?
Don't look closely to my right hand. So this is another outgrowth of not having focused on technique. Consciously when I was a kid.
Something that developed from...
Here's a really stupid story. So I was at Berkeley and I was practicing a lot. I think I was probably practicing Chili Pepper stuff and just playing too hard. You know, like, you know... You know, and like the action on the bass was probably set up wrong, and and I was playing, and next thing I knew, I had massive calluses and blisters all over my fingers, and I had a proficiency that I had to do, like one of those tests where you have to play scales and arpeggios, and like my middle finger hurt so bad that I could barely even touch it to the string.
Well, just because of playing.
So to get past this proficiency, I thought, okay, instead of doing this, which is what I was doing most of the time, I'll just do this. And I was like, I'm a weird kind of OCD person. And I was like, well, that's symmetrical, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the same size, aren't they?
Yeah,
the middle finger's like an anomaly.
Yeah, I know.
Kind of
it's like, what's this all about?
It's like 5 mil too long.
So I was like, and then suddenly I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I don't know how, but like it just happened. Like I literally don't know when the middle finger starts to kind of creep in. But after I started playing for a couple of years, suddenly like this was showing up sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those guys who can like alternate all 3 fingers like that crazy Alex Webster method, where it's like you can get really, really smooth speed if you work on that for a while.
Yeah.
Did I work on that for a while? No, because I'm lazy. And also because I'm not primarily interested in technique for technique's sake. I'm much more interested in tone and groove and song.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking at my right hand and going, how does he do that? Don't ask me.
Yeah, it's just something that
it's just something that's developed,
yeah.
And sometimes it's an impediment. I mean, like, listen, for 99% of the music out there, it wouldn't be an impediment, but I just happen to find the 1% of music where sometimes it is.
Do you ever sort of like do you consciously switch between the 2 techniques or not, or does your hand just take care of itself?
Completely unconscious, unless I'm running into a problem, and then I'll go, okay, well, why isn't that working?
How can I?
And then I'll try and work around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think I'd have something systemic by this point to make sure that never happened, but no.
But when you're in Berkeley, is that when, because sometimes it doesn't come across on camera that, when you're noodling around, as a musician, I know that you understand harmony and the way that, just the way that you play around the neck, I can hear the chords going by. You're thinking about it in that way rather than just playing riffs, right? So
it was already embedded from the classical piano lessons. I got the circle of fifths, and then I did take some private lessons and learned modes when I was a junior in high school.
Got it.
So I knew that the Dorian was the always remember the key accidentals, that the Dorian was flat 3 and natural 6 in the minor, and that Mixolydian was the major scale with a flat 7.
Yeah.
And that Phrygian was the Spanish sounding one. And all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had that, which I didn't realize was, when you're 18 and you were going into Berkeley, was a heads up, compared to some of the people who were showing up there. But what ended up happening is that I had a lot more harmonic knowledge and ear training ability than I was able to translate onto my instrument. The instrument was an impediment, essentially, to what was going on in my head.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a lifelong struggle. I mean, I'm the kid who had to stay after school when I was in 2nd grade to learn how to cut with scissors properly, because I couldn't cut a circle smoothly.
And do you feel like that?
I know, I'll be a bass player for a living.
Yeah. Trying to apply the harmony and the theory to the instrument, you felt like it was a...
Well, I just could always, and to this day, I can always hear things before I can play them.
Got it.
My mind moves pretty quickly, but the fingers are always trying to catch up. And
I'm
then
the opposite. My brain's like, oh.
Well, I know. I was listening to you. You were playing. You were getting around. It sounded great. So smooth. I was just like, man, why does my right hand do that? So, but it's one of those things where also, when you're at a music school, I kind of had to make a choice. I remember I was taking my proficiencies and getting more and more into having to solo over changes in jazz and stuff like that. And just like, I was doing it, but like I was doing it to pass the test.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what was I listening to? I was listening to, Zeppelin, Fishbone, Zappa.
Yeah.
All this progressive stuff and fusion stuff. And I was like, with the fusion thing, I really had to make a choice. It was like, am I going to like learn all the Charlie Parker solos and like really do the work of what it takes to be like a real jazz player? And like, I remember being 20 or 21 years old and just being like, no.
Yeah. You didn't want to be that in the future.
I did. I never listened to it.
Yeah.
I think that in the end, the best thing that you can do for yourself is just to be true to what you're inspired by.
100%, yeah.
Like just play the music you love.
Yeah.
It'll always come out better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than if you're playing something that you're just doing it because someone thinks you should, or because you think it'll look good or you'll be cool if you do it or blah, blah, or anything.
Yeah.
You know, it just come from inside. You know, that's, I finally got there with this most recent solo album that I just put out, this progressive double
Last year,
concept
wasn't
album,
it? Yeah.
Scenes from the Flood. You know, I'd made 2 albums before that, and they were kind of flirting between like jazz fusion and progressive and instrumental rock. And for a second there, I was doing like a really low rent John Patitucci impersonation. And, you know, it was just like, wait a minute. You know, and Patitucci's great, but it's like, he did the work. He listened to all the jazz stuff. I'm like, I didn't do that. So I'm not going to sound like that. So finally, it took me 46 years to just be like, no, I'm going to make a progressive double concept album. That's the album I always wanted to make.
Yeah.
And there's no pretense there. There's no jazz on this album.
Yeah.
It's just instrumental, progressive-minded rock music. And I'm just so much happier. I don't know who said it, but there's some variation of a quote that says that the root of all suffering is in being and acting in a way that's not who you really are.
Yeah.
If you can just identify those moments when you're doing that and eliminate them as much as possible, a lot of suffering goes away.
People want to check that album out. Where can they get it?
I mean, first of all, it's on all the streaming services.
I was going
if
to
you
say
want to try
Spotify
before you buy,
and
of course.
iTunes and all
but
of
if
that
you want
stuff.
to support the artist, then what you want to do is just go to bryanbeller.com.
Yeah.
And there's a web store there, and you can, there's high-res digital available through Bandcamp. You can choose anything up to FLAC, 48K wave, uncompressed completely. Or there's physical media. It's available on CD, and actually it's double vinyl.
I was going to say, have you got it on vinyl?
It is double vinyl, yeah, because it was inspired by The Wall.
Yeah.
And Tales from Topographic Oceans, the big, like 2 big classic progressive double albums. I wanted it to have the feeling of having those 4 parts.
Yeah.
So, it does have 2 big halves if you're listening to it on a CD.
Yeah.
And you can listen to it straight down if you're listening to it digitally. But if you listen to it on vinyl, you'll get the 4 sides because there is some definite intentionality into part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4.
Get it on vinyl.
The songs segue. So yeah, bryanbeller.com, there's a web store. And even if you live in the UK or EU, which apparently will be 2 different things soon.
Yeah. Oh, don't go down that rabbit hole.
I know. But there's a warehouse in the UK, which is better than the warehouse in Arizona, regardless of how Brexit turns out.
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I say. We have a warehouse set up on the continent.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about when you moved to California and how the we said obviously right at the top of this interview we said you play with all of the guitar gods. I'm assuming like a lot of them live down in California. How did that happen?
Well, they all came from Long Island, didn't they?
Yeah.
From Long Island, for people who don't know, Long Island is a near New York City, New York. It's like suburbs outside New York. I mean, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, John Petrucci, and Mike Keneally all grew up within like 20 miles of each other.
Get out.
Like,
Seriously?
What was in the water in the early 60s?
They're all the similar age, aren't they? John Petrucci's a little young, isn't he?
A bit.
Yeah.
A bit. Petrucci's kind of in between me and those guys.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, that's just weird.
Yeah.
And, New Jersey, it's funny, Guthrie has taught me that, like, because he grew up here and he spent some time in Essex.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, Essex is Essex. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. He's like, well, it's kind of like New Jersey. And so, when I say I grew up in New Jersey, it's like, there's a certain kind of an attitude in growing up in New Jersey. And Long Island is kind of the same thing, just a different flavor of it. It's kind of like this kind of tough suburb, it's a vibe. It's definitely a mood. Anyway, they're all from Long Island and they all moved away, except for Petrucci. He's still there.
Oh, is he still up there?
Satriani's in San Francisco, Vai is in LA, and Keneally's in San Diego. So they've covered the whole California coast. And I moved there in '93 to be with Dweezil. And again, this kind of answered the question from like my early school years when I was like, I know I don't feel like I belong here in this socioeconomic environment.
Got it.
This place, New Jersey. And as much as I, I'm happy to proclaim my roots, I am a Jersey guy.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got to California and as soon as I saw the big open spaces and the mountain vistas and just how much land there was and how beautiful it was, I realized in my heart and my soul that I was in the right place.
Yeah.
It's very hard to describe, but I knew it. Yeah. And to this day, I live in a very, very small, remote mountain community north of the city. Only a couple thousand people live there, and it's really... Most people in LA don't even know where it is. And it's only 30, 40 minutes from the city, but it's out there.
Yeah.
And was Dweezil your first? Because he's like, obviously, he's like one of the guitar gods as well, isn't he? Like, was he your route into meeting and playing with Satriani, Vai,
Well, yeah,
Keneally,
of course,
those guys,
yeah. I mean, Keneally was in the band. Mike
Got it.
Keneally was in Dweezil's band when I joined, and Mike Keneally had been in Frank Zappa's last touring band. And I remember, learning the Dweezil music, which was difficult enough. It was just like very riffy rock.
Yeah.
Very complicated riffy rock. Lots of unison runs and weird stuff coming out of nowhere in the middle of like a verse of a standard rock song. Suddenly, whoa.
Yeah.
And so I had to memorize and learn a lot of new technique and stuff like that. But Mike Keneally was in the band, and then I heard his solo material for the first time, and I was completely blown away. Here was a guy who was coming from like, heavily influenced by like XTC, the Beatles, Frank Zappa, and Gentle Giant. Such an incredibly eclectic mix of influences. And those first two records that he had, Hat, which was already out in 91 when I joined the band in 93, and then Boil That Dust Back, the record that he was working on when I joined the band. I was just so blown away by what he was doing. So
he's super talented.
He really is.
He really is.
So I ended up playing in his band, and that's where I kind of felt like my heart was really there. And then a couple years later, Mike Keneally decided to leave Dweezil's band to pursue a solo career, and I left at the same time.
Got it.
And that's how everything started. And it was during that time, kind of near when we left, where we met Steve Vai. He had just put out Sex and Religion, and we all went to the whole Dweezil band. Me, Mike Keneally, Joe Travers, I remember, and Gail Zappa. We all went to go see the Sex and Religion show.
Yeah, with Devin was singing on that, wasn't he?
Yeah. And I mean, at that time, I'm a huge Devin Townsend fan. I have all the Strapping Young Lad albums and all that stuff. Alien is one of my favorite records of all time.
Yeah.
I just, back then, I was just confused. I didn't understand.
What is this?
I'm like, okay, I have Passion and Warfare. I know how this works. I don't understand
so good, wasn't it?
How this works. Yeah, and I didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, Steve, God bless him, he found Devin somehow. I don't even know the story of how he found him.
How old was Devin? Like,
he was like 19.
Was he? I was going to say 19 or 20.
He was really young.
Yeah.
And just so incredibly talented, just doing all the Steve Vai guitar parts, and then acting like, like totally taking the piss, like really taking the piss, like Frank Zappa, like making faces on stage and singing and screaming and all that crazy stuff he could do with his voice.
Yeah.
We were communicating on Twitter when we were both working on these massive albums that we were working on. Empath is his latest album, and Mike Keneally was in his touring band.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Got it.
When they just did Europe, they were in Europe at the same time the Aristocrats were just now, and a lot of the people that we knew were coming to see the Aristocrats had also just seen a Devin show, or were going to see a Devin show. Also, Haken opened up for Devin. Are you familiar with Haken?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great UK prog band.
Yeah.
Ray Hearn, the drummer from Haken, is on my solo album.
Oh, really?
On the most difficult song, on a song called World Class. 9-minute, massive, progressive
monster
song.
of a tune.
Yeah.
What were some of when you started when you went from Berkeley down to California, you hooked up with Dweezil, and then like playing with Keneally, and then Satriani and Vai. What were some of the big lessons that you learned going through that in terms of playing and being a professional muso as well?
Well, first of all, just play bass. And Joe Satriani, this is a good example, right? I mean, people, I think maybe sometimes hear Joe Satriani's music, especially if they're coming from like Vai and Zappa world, and they listen to it and they hear a song like Summer Song, where it's like, the bass line is...
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, whatever. But it's not whatever. If you actually get inside those songs, the simplicity has a very, very specific construction, and there's a reason why it works. And so, it's one of those things, especially in muso world, where it was a great opportunity to kind of just go back to basics.
Yeah.
And just play bass. Now, he wants you to let loose and have fun on the gig, but I mean, you can't just throw crazy slap and hammer-on licks all over the place just because you're playing instrumental rock. There's a song. He's playing a melody, you know? Or like Flying in a Blue Dream, Right?
Yeah.
Just, those...
playing the simplest of stuff. There's a real talent to that, you know. Making it sit in the pocket like that.
Get every note as even as possible, and still have that little bounce, that the straight rock bounce.
The velocity of all the notes aren't the same. You know, you're playing into certain notes harder than others.
Yeah, and then giving a little bit of muting, so you're not just like. Maybe there's a point in the song where you want that to give it a little bit of an emotional lift, but otherwise. That stuff all counts. You can feel it in the groove when a straight eighth groove is really right.
Yeah.
And
did you have that together when you went down there when you first started?
I think because of the R&B background, it was one of those things that I internally had together.
Yeah.
That even though it's applied to rock,
Yeah.
like that when you're playing I Wish, it's not. It's. So you're right there. You're already modifying your playing. It's tight.
Yeah.
Whether you're using this finger to mute right after it, or this. One way or the other, you're not doing this. You're not doing this. Even though that it actually sounds a little bit like what Nathan was doing. All that stuff. But you have to overdrive the pickups in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, all I'm saying is that, your right hand and your left hand technique are kind of dictating note duration and groove.
Yeah.
And I think the basics of pop, rock, and R&B translate to rock a lot easier than maybe some people might imagine, especially when the song form is more specific.
Yeah.
And slightly controlled as it is maybe in the Joe Satriani environment.
Got it.
Which is not to say there aren't moments in this show where we just don't all go apeshit and just, play a bunch of stuff, but it's a bit rootsier, based in kind of like blues and R&B and straight up rock than maybe some of the Vai stuff, which is based on, Zappa, which is modern classical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And going between the different projects as well, talking about like Satriani and Vai, have you got your sound that you use across all projects, or is there certain tweaks that you have to do?
No, there's definitely, and it depends on the instrument. So this is one of those things where, of course, I wish that we could just have my live setup sitting right here, and you would see the three instruments that I'm using live right now.
Got it.
One of them is very much like this. This is the M5, upright. I love this bass because it's a bright sounding jazz bass that's awesome from fret 1
super jazz,
to fret
it?
24. Yeah, it's ultimate 5-string jazz bass, 35-inch scale. The action it's set up perfectly, by the way. It's just like, I can't believe I just picked up this instrument and I'm just like,
this has been in my house for like the last 2 weeks.
Like I could, and we will edit this if I get this wrong. But this is like, there's this song. So we're just talking about the basses that I use, okay? And there's this bass that I found in 1999, Michael M5, the modern 5, with a maple neck, ash body, maple top, Seymour Duncan 6770 pickups, and a Bartolini and TMB preamp. It's all designed to be a bright, spanking jazz bass.
Yeah.
And I find that it has a kind of mid-range that reacts really, really well with overdrive. All right, so, it does that, but also you can play just,
Yeah.
So now there's this part that Guthrie wrote for a song on the new Aristocrats album, which is called Last Orders, which is probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to play on stage. Ever. And it's really quiet and it's totally isolated and I'm totally naked up there, and I would say I get it right, like to my satisfaction, like every note right, once out of every 8 times I play it live.
Got it,
And he, Guthrie's the king of coming up with like really rich harmonic parts, and it goes like this. I'll show you.
Yeah. yeah.
Tuning. Oh. There. So
It's a beast.
It is so hard. And the thing that makes it really hard, this part's, bad enough. You really have to, it's like a pinky exercise. And then all these fingers, there is only one way to do this. If any one of these fingers goes in the wrong place, you can't do it. So there's like kind of like it's like a C minor inverted, right?
Yeah.
There's your E flat and there's your C and there's your
minor
G.
third on the bottom.
Exactly.
Right,
And then a D minor.
Yeah.
And then hammer on with the pinky. And then, right? Okay, so you basically just a C minor.
Yeah.
Here's the bitch. Guthrie calls this moving the problem around. There's only one way to do it. I think there's another modification, but it's not worth getting into. So now this is G minor.
Yeah.
It's hard to get there. Here. That's a crazy stretch. And then you have to slide that. That's the hard part.
That's the hard bit, yeah. Because one finger's sliding the whole step, one finger's sliding the semitone.
It's a nightmare, especially on high volume stages when things aren't really right. It's nice and controlled in here. And so this is like an F major 6.
Yeah.
And then a C9 or C2. And then repeat. And then into a G minor. A flat major. B flat major. And then to the 4 chord, the F major.
Yeah.
Sorry for the tuning. And then finally there's your 1. Oh my God. So the humbling thing, of course, is that there's a demo where Guthrie played it. It's like, this isn't fair. He's already so good on guitar. It's like
yeah.
So anyway, we sat down and worked out. I was like, okay, so I think this is the fingering that you use. He's like, yeah. It's like, and you have to put your ring finger here and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then when you do it, it's right. Now, why did I go through this whole thing? Because this instrument is like one of the only instruments I can play it on.
Got it.
Because I'm used to this neck shape, I'm used to everything about this instrument, and like I've tried to play it on other instruments, and like I can get it to work, but like it doesn't sound like this. And so this is the instrument that I used on the record.
Really?
And well, not this one, but I mean like the Mike Lowell M5.
Your M5, yeah.
So that's what this bright instrument does. It's aggressive, it's rock, it does the pretty thing, it just does everything right. And then for like a darker kind of like more rootsy R&B thing, I have a Mike Lowell PJ passive.
Got it.
And that is a completely different tone wood setup. It's an alder body with a rosewood fingerboard, and it's just really nice and sweet and deep and chocolatey and
darker sound.
Much darker sound, and that's great for some of the Joe stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a P bass on a lot of Joe stuff.
I was going to say, because obviously you change your playing slightly, or your approach, should I say, between the different projects, like Satriani, Vi, and all of the other guys, and your own stuff. There'll be a little change in your approach.
Yeah.
And obviously your tonal change as well.
Yeah. Exactly. But I think that, I mean, your right hand's where it all starts, but the instrument really matters.
Yeah.
So I have a third instrument that is a new signature of mine called the BBMF5. MF stands for Modern Focus, not anything else, people. And it's basically designed to be like a really these are all kind of souped up Fender jazz basses or PJ combos. That's what Mike Lowell really does. That's their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Like the really amazing playing, especially 5 strings. Classic vintage style instruments. Even though it's called modern, it's still vintage. You just gotta get your arm around that.
Yeah.
But there's this other style, like kind of like, Spectre World, with EMGs. And I have a couple of Spectres and I use them in the studio and they're really great instruments. My hand doesn't really love the way the necks feel, either the thin one or the wide one. So I have to be in kind of specific places for them as opposed to just pulling off all sorts of stuff live with them. But they sound amazing. And I wanted to have a Mike Lowell that kind of felt really great and sounded like that. Now a bolt-on can never sound like a neck through. ever,
Yeah.
ever. It's just a different beast.
Yeah.
But we worked together and we came up with a custom neck spacing, and we put a set of EMG DC40s in there with the BQC preamp, and did it. Is it alder? Yeah, alder with a maple top and an ebony fingerboard. And it's got this really fast, smooth, like really punchy mid-range kind of compressy thing. And that's my bass for when I really need to kind of be smooth and like haul ass.
Got it.
You know?
Yeah.
And it cuts through metal mixes really well too. So that's a completely different sound that I
Is
use
that
for
soap
something like
bars?
that.
Yeah, soap
They are
bars.
soap bars, yeah, exactly.
So you play like a full range, don't you? You play like the Super J bassy thing, you've got the
and
PJ thing going on, and
then
the soap bars.
That's right, and they all have different purposes, and that's what our job is as bass players. I mean, I think it's our job as musicians.
Yeah, I should actually just sort of like add, because some of the guys won't know, but if you think back to when SWR was like a real sort of like powerhouse of a company, SWR amps, many people might not know, but you were like the guy behind all that. So
it all depends
Bryan
on how old
is like
you
a
are, isn't
super tone geek.
Well, I was just, well, the thing is I mean, I'm super, ask anybody who's like traveled with me or worked
You were
with me. Like,
president of SWR, right?
I was the vice president in the end, but I mean, like I'm just really particular about everything. I can't help it.
I just wanted to point it out because I think that just to, it's important.
I'm one of those guys, and listen. God bless all of the people who are working at equipment companies, especially the musicians, because in the end, even though there's like an engineering team and they're very talented, and there's a marketing team and they're very talented, and then you have the salespeople who are also talented, or else no one's going to eat. In the end, there's got to be a musician there who's like the last word on the product.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't make sense to the musician, you're not going to sell them to anybody. So when I was playing SWR in the 90s, when I was playing with Dweezil and Mike Keneally, I was just an endorsing artist. And what happened was I went broke. I had no money. I couldn't figure out how to make money as a musician. I was a dumb kid, you know?
Yeah.
And so I asked them for a job. They were like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yes, I'm sure." So I started off testing amplifiers, and then I did customer service, and then I did artist relations, and then I did exports, learned about European business, and then I ended up doing product managing and working with the engineers to come up with stuff that I thought that musicians would really like.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite position. It was so much fun. I got to really, really like be super tweaky. We had a great sound room. I would just spend hours down there just listening to the differences between speakers, EQ, preamps, power amps, everything.
Did you learn just like an obscene amount in the process of doing that?
I did,
about
especially
tone.
not only about tone, but also about the engineering process and what it takes to bring that forward. You know, like, okay, I could say, well, I want it to sound more like this. You know, in the end, that ends up like, that's like capacitors, resistors, numbers, math. It's math in the end.
Yeah.
And the engineers, the guys laying out a circuit board, has to kind of come up and be able to deal with that. And then there's a mechanical engineer, which has to be able to come up with a physical form that makes sense. And it all has to fit together. You could say, I want 25 controls on there, and I also want it to be this big. I want it to weigh 2 pounds, and I want it to cost $20.
And the
engineer's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, dream
sure,
on, dreamer.
I quit. So there's balances that you learn a lot. And I learned so much about business, thank God, because I didn't know anything.
Is that something that has served you well since, with the sort of like
Absolutely.
the aristocrats and all of that? Because a band's a business, right?
Yeah. And so once I did product managing for a year and a half, and then I ended up becoming like one of the people in management and the vice president. And then Fender bought SWR, and then I was part of the transition and was brought over to manage the SWR brand inside Fender for 2 years. And then, boy, I really learned a lot about how corporate businesses work. And I'm not saying that in a negative way or positive way. I'm just saying
it's huge.
It just is what it is.
It's huge, yeah.
I was doing reporting to boards, and I was doing, PowerPoint presentations, sales presentations to, hundreds of people. It was nuts. And then finally I was like, all right.
Did you ever have like a moment where you were just like...
Yeah, many. Well, and the funny thing
How
is
did
is
this
that
happen?
Other people were...
with your keynote presentation.
Yeah, and other people were... And I had short hair, and I was the business thing, and like I was already like doing work with Vi at that point, and like people in the company, a couple of them, especially when I first came over to Fender, they were there before I was. They were like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Oh, because this is like really... This is what I'm doing. I'm blah, blah. I came up with some... I didn't really have a good answer, but it was just inertia was what I was doing. I got myself out of debt, and then I just kind of kept doing it.
Yeah.
And then, yes, finally at some point I was just like, I have to stop doing this. And so I just started over. I was 34 with no plan. I just said, I want to be a musician again. And thank God it all worked out. You
Yeah,
know, it took a couple years. It was lean in the beginning.
Was it?
Yeah, sure.
Did
They
you
were
have,
like, oh yeah,
did you
you're
have
the
to pull the
SWR guy, right?
handbrake? Because a lot of people that I speak to, and this is musicians, but also friends that are just sort of like professionals and they're thinking about going from one career to the other. In my opinion, there's never kind of sort of like a seamless crossover. There's always sort of like a...
It was one of those things where it was almost seamless. I almost ended up going right into the first Zappa Plays Zappa touring band right after I left Fender. But wires got crossed and it didn't happen. And then it was another couple years, and like I didn't have that much savings. I had some savings, and I was living on it and trying to make it all work. And I was just about to run out and have to do something I didn't want to do. And then the Steve Vai touring thing happened in 2007. And then Death Clock happened right behind it.
Got it.
And so then I had like a subsistence living, and it was working out for a while. And then finally in 2011, the Aristocrats started. And then in 2013, it really kind of started to become successful. And the Joe Satriani thing happened at the same time. So at
Everything aligned.
At 43,
Everything
was
aligned,
the first time where I really kind of had it all together. I was like, wow, I can like do this. This is going to work.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I was so grateful for having that business background, because when the Aristocrats started, you know, we had a manager in the beginning, but then he had other things he wanted to do, and now he works at Strandberg Guitars. He's an executive there.
Oh, really?
So he's doing great.
I got it, yeah.
And I ended up being the manager of the band for 6 years. And it's not that it wasn't difficult, because, you know, there's always things to manage. But compared to a new unsolvable problem every day for which I was responsible, but didn't have the authority to allocate resources in a big company in order to provide the information and the reporting to my superiors that they were asking for. Compared to that, managing a band was easy. So I was like, all right, I can do this. It's just spreadsheets and logistics and whatever. So fortunately, we have a great new guy who's handling that for us. His name is Riccardo Capelli, and he was booking us in Europe, and now he's taken that over for me, so I don't have to do that anymore.
Wicked.
But there's nothing wrong with a little sweat equity in this business.
Yeah.
You know, because you gotta. It's one thing to make money; it's another thing to keep the money.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that there's some left over after you do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What have you like? If anybody's like thinking, like musicians out there that have got a project together and want to go out there and tour it, what should they be doing to actually go from garage, you know, rehearsing whatever, few bands in a town, to actually doing a tour?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. But let me just approach it from the marketing standpoint first of all, because everything is you're online all the time these days. Who are you? Like, what are you? Who are you, and what do you do? Yeah. So this is the exercise that I if I do a lecture, this is what I ask people to consider. Okay, you're in a band or you're an artist. Okay, write your bio. Write your, you know, this is your official press on who you are and what you do, and take as long as you want. Like, you know, make it 5 pages, whatever. Just get it all out. All right, great. Done. You got your 3 pages, your 5 pages, your 2 pages, whatever. All right. Now make it 1 page. Come back when it's 1 page. All right. So then you start looking at everything that you've written down. Like, what? I can condense this into 1 page. All right. Okay, great. Now make it 1 paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay. Now make it 10 words. And you'll see that once you write over and over again what it is that you're trying to describe that you do, there are certain words and vibes that keep coming up and up and up. And then finally you can distill it right down to something very, very basic.
Yeah.
You know, like for the Aristocrats, I like to just say it's, you know, more fun than any fusion group should have any right to have. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so you already know it's instrumental. It's kind of a rock fusion thing. And we're taking the piss. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's not super serious. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
The rest is just whatever the rest
is. It's like
is,
an elevator pitch for who you are.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for you to know that for yourself. You know, you already know it, actually, when you're doing it. It's already in there. You just kind of haven't done the work to kind of extract it. You got to mine it.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely, yeah.
So, as far as putting together your actual materials, and because, I mean, like, what's the Instagram bio these days, right? It's like 100 characters?
Yeah.
200 characters?
Yeah.
So you got to be able to say something. What's the Twitter bio?
Yeah.
It's 1 sentence.
Yeah.
You know? So you can have your thing, but you need to be able to kind of just get it right out there and do it. And then, you know, is what you're doing aligned with what's in your heart and in your mind and the music that you love, that you've been listening to your whole life?
Yeah.
If it's that, then you're probably on the right path. Then just get your, you know, do the work, get your craft together, make sure you have a set, and then just, I would say if you're going to do shows, always keep in mind the arc of the set. You know, just, it's not just a collection of songs. You know, the first song has got to draw people in, you know, right away. You know, you just got to kind of grab them somehow.
Yeah.
And then you're telling a story over whether it's 20 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour. You know, you want there to be an arc to the story.
Yeah.
You know, there can be some, you know, intensity and pizzazz in the beginning, and then there should be a point where people get to breathe for a bit. And then you're building up to some kind of climax, something to leave them with.
The bands that you find now, where are you finding them? Like these new, we've talked about several in the last hour. You've been have you heard of these guys? Have you heard of these guys?
Yeah.
Where have you found out about
sometimes
them?
it's just an accident. I mean, like, I'm not the biggest Spotify guy in the world, but I will put it on sometimes just to listen to something that someone recommends. And then sometimes I'll just let it play and let it choose what the next thing is going to be.
Got it, yeah.
And it's funny. I had a friend who said, oh, you should check these guys out. And I listened to it and I was like, that's not for me. But I was in the other room. And I just kind of let Spotify play. And then the next thing that came on, I was like,
damn, this is great.
Actually, I was like, oh, wow, it doesn't even sound like the same band, but I like this song. And then I walked up and shot. Sure enough, it wasn't the same band.
Yeah.
It was Psychedelic Corn Crumpets. And they're awesome.
Who you've got to know just for the name.
I know. Well, that's the funny thing is because I saw that Guthrie was on a magazine cover at some point, and they were one of the subheads above his head. It said Psychedelic Corn Crumpets. And I remember seeing it and being like, really? There's a band called Psychedelic Corn Crumpets? Like, it's mission accomplished, right? I remembered it.
Yeah.
And then it came up on Spotify and I listened to it, and it was like this, like half prog, half surf, half, you know, psychedelic, like late 60s, early 70s vibe band.
Yeah.
That was super cool. And so then I just listened to the next song on their album for that pulled up, and then the next one, and then that was it. I bought it.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an example of how I found out about a new band.
Yeah, because I think that sometimes like bands don't know how to capitalize on all of these different social media channels, and like they're just like, what do we do?
Well, you know, I'm not into. I haven't like put together a playlist and published it. I know that people, that's a big thing to be on somebody's important playlist. And
Got it. Yeah.
When I was finally done with my solo album, Scenes from the Flood, I had been working on it for 3 years, and I just didn't pick my head up. I was just extremely isolated.
Yeah.
Because it was 88 minutes of music. It was 26 musicians. It was just such a huge project. By the time I picked my head up, the social media universe had completely changed since the last time I put out a solo album.
Got it.
Completely. I had to learn everything all over again. I didn't know how Instagram even worked.
Yeah.
And this was like just a few months ago.
It's tough, isn't it? It is hard, isn't it? I think that what you guys have had as well, like the Aristocrats and you, is that you've built a community around what you do. Like you've got a community of, I think like 10, 20 years ago, you would call it fans. And I think they are fans, but it's more of a community that love what you do. Like the Aristocrats have got a community of fans.
We're very, very fortunate. We had when Marco and I have been playing together in various Marco
He's
Miniman
insane,
and I.
by
Yeah,
the
he's
way.
crazy. Yeah, and we played together with Mike Keneally. Again, Mike Keneally brought us together, playing his impossible music. Some of his music is incredibly difficult in ways that don't sound difficult. Like, you know, you listen to some shreddy thing and you're just like, oh my God, that sounds hard. But you listen to the Keneally stuff and it just sounds weird. And then you just sit down and play it and you go, oh my God, how do you do this? How do you even think of this? And I remember the first time we came over to Europe, and he's like, we're going to pick up Marco over here, and I'd never met Marco, and I played with a lot of drummers who played Keneally and stuff, and some of them, like, you know, they struggled with it in the beginning.
Got it.
And he had all the hardest songs on the song list, and I was just like, Mike, and Mike liked to do that, to try and like sometimes take a risk, and it doesn't always work out. He just likes that.
It's like a dare.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I'm like, come on, man, this isn't going to work. He's like, no. It is. You don't know who this guy is. I'm like, I don't. So we got there, and I met Marco, and he's got these charts, and he's just reading this impossible stuff straight down, and not just reading it, like just kicking the shit out of it. And I just remember looking at him and being like, who are you?
Yeah, if somebody was said, because there's like so many drummers out there that have got like incredible chops, right?
Right.
The difference for me when I listen to Marco is that he's got all of the chops under the sun, and this is kind of sort of like a negative of some drummers as well that have all the chops under the sun, is that he's got sort of like really great groove and pocket when he does it. Some of the other guys are missing that one piece.
Well,
they can play the phrase, they can play it.
That's the difference, is that it's rock and metal.
Yeah,
I mean, like, we had a very similar CD collection when we were growing up. Not all the same, but a lot of the same. All the metal, the thrash, the big four thrash bands from the 80s, Zeppelin, Floyd, Rush, just a lot of that same stuff. And when he lays in, it's a big groove. And
Yeah,
so
it
there's a lot of
sounds
things
great,
that we
yeah.
didn't have to talk about, which made the whole thing work really well, especially when we're playing difficult stuff like Keneally. Anyway, we had done Keneally's thing. He played on one of my albums, one song. I played on his instructional DVD. And so we were floating around doing stuff. But it wasn't until we found Guthrie that suddenly it was like that explosion happened. And we were also fortunate that when we found Guthrie was one of those underground guys who didn't have a website, wasn't on social media. You know, you're British, so you know. But the rest of the world didn't know that the world's greatest guitarist was like playing a weekend gig at this place in Chelmsford every week, and that people were coming from Japan to see him play fusion. It's
crazy,
right?
isn't it? Yeah.
So when we formed the band, we had this initial push of publicity because, thank God, every guitar magazine in the world said, "Oh, Guthrie Govan's in a band now with these other guys. We can put him on the cover of our magazine."
Yeah.
And Guitar Player did it. Young Guitar in Japan did it. Guitar and Bass in Germany did it. The Guitarist UK. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
We couldn't have bought that kind of publicity.
That was like the excitement.
And that was the initial rocket fuel for the band. And then we just kept touring and touring and touring and touring. And it was a good time for social media, 2011, 12, 13, 14. It was still kind of very positive vibes out there. I mean, it's kind of
loads of organic reach as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, now it's kind of a weird world out there. But I mean, like back then, everything was very, very positive. And it just grew from us doing the work of touring and putting out records and putting out live albums. And then also kind of like doing it our own way, all independent, going straight to the fans. Not dealing with a record company or anything like that. And fortunately, it all just happened. And now here we are, 8 years later. And it's all really worked.
Guys, Bryan Beller, where did they find you, Bryan?
They can find me. My website is simple as bryanbeller.com, BRYANBELLER. And I am on all social media. I'm on Facebook. My musician page is facebook.com/BryanBellerBass.
Yeah.
And on Twitter, I'm just Bryan Beller. And on Instagram, I'm Bryan Beller Bass.
And Aristocrats and...
the Aristocrats, that's different because we had to... Everything's weird because there's all sorts of Aristocrat stuff out there.
Oh, really? Right,
you find Twitter is Acrats Band.
Yeah.
Facebook is Aristocrats Band. And I think that Instagram is The Aristocrats Band.
You'll find them.
Yeah, just
search it.
Google
You'll find
Aristocrats, Beller, Miniman, Govan, and you'll find them.
Ladies and gents,
all right.
Bryan, cheers, man.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.
All right. What's it? See you in the shed. Isn't that what they say?
Oh, yeah. See you in the shed.
Right? That's the line, right?